Welcome to the Liberty Mindset. Come and explore some of the ideas and issues facing our liberty. 2022 is an election year. As libertarians, we ask that you consider voting in the Liberty Mindset. Welcome, and thank you for your time. Welcome back to the extra episode with a woof of authority of the Liberty Mindset. Let's call this episode 4.5. In the last week, we found some amazing apparent infractions of the U.S. government and the Fourth Amendment. On August 8th, 2022, the FBI served a no-knock warrant to Mar-a-Lago, the home and business of Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States. For 3 months in 2021, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, copied 4,000 plus records of firearm transfers. This is in direct violation of the ATF rules of conduct. The FBI has now charged 4 officers with vague infractions based on Breonna Taylor's shooting on March 13th, 2020. For a quick review, the 4 officers were charged were cleared of a grand jury of an ongoing of wrongdoing in 2020. One officer was charged with reckless endangerment after firing a round from the side of the building, not the front door, blindly through a window. In March of this year, those charges were acquitted. The officer was found innocent. One officer was shot at the front door by Breonna's boyfriend, who thought drug traffickers were pretending to be police. He was not charged in the end, and the shooting was ruled self-defense. Pamela Scott, IOI, Industry Operations Investigator from the ATF, spent 3 months photographing the A&D, Acquisition and Dispensation logbooks in 2021. Ms. Scott collected over 4,000 records and found 47, quote, administrative irregularities. These may not be infractions. They can be unreadable entry or a phone number in the wrong place. Some of these guidelines can vary depending on what ATF district the seller is located in, meaning the information may be requested by the ATF office but not required by law. Note Dave Nagel, who has not been charged, and as of this filming, his FFL is in good standing. Finally, on August 8th, the FBI served a no-knock warrant on Mar-a-Lago, a business and Florida residence of Donald J. Trump Sr., the 45th President of the United States. The warrant specified some 15 boxes of warehouse records and items, and the contents of his safe, which were broke into with force. The charges are the mishandling of confidential material. These are the same charges that were dropped by the Department of Justice in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, then the Secretary of State. Clinton's only defense was a lack of competence in handling of secret documents and electronic policy. She had a private email server that not only had 32,000 emails deleted beyond recovery, but was insecure and contained spyware suspected to be planted by the Russia government. Note, presidents routinely obtain and keep documents relating to their seizure as president. For perspective, the 44th president, President Obama, retained some 30 million documents that he kept from the archives and cannot be accessed by FOIA requests. They are currently stored in a furniture warehouse in Chicago, purchased for, quote, his library. So, and also just before we started filming, we found out that Representative Paul Scott of Georgia had his phone collected by the FBI, where 3 agents came up to him while he was with his family and confiscated his cell phone. So
yeah. We've got a lot going on this last week. A lot of infractions from legal sides. And when we look at Breonna Taylor's case, we're like, okay, well, maybe we have, the road towards a potential win here. I'm not entirely sure yet, though, because, as we've discussed off camera, we're not sure if the right people are going to be held accountable for their actions. But one thing I was thinking about as
let's pretend for the sake of argument we are.
Well, and
we're diving into a research right now, and that'll not make good video. So
well, I was thinking about it. I'm like, if the way that they've been kind of going at the way the lawyers have been going at the case for Breonna Taylor is, it seems like Breonna Taylor's lawyers are attaching just individual bits of the case, the illegal parts just as they need to, as opposed to just throwing the whole thing at them at once. In our last episode, we talked with Leon Noble, and he was talking about how he felt Multnomah County's district attorney was stacking everything up and is basically pushing it forward so that he couldn't not win, basically, because there's just too much evidence. And I thought that well, and I thought that that's kind of what they would do with Breonna Taylor's case, but it doesn't seem like they're quite doing that. It seems like there's a little more strategy there. If they, if they can't get him for this, maybe they can get him for this. And I'm wondering if that's what they're doing, because right now it's like they've been like the four officers who weren't part of the warrant are the ones who are in the spotlight, emptying 32 rounds into an apartment through window, 10 of those through a window and into another person's apartment. Shots went upstairs and as well. So they've endangered a lot of people in this. And yes, there needs to be some repercussion for all that endangering of everybody and the death of Breonna Taylor and all of that. But
we read on that the officer that was shot through the window, he was watching the back exit is what it was. And
yeah,
he shot through a window, not even apparently, according to what evidence was produced, he just held his gun up and pulled the trigger.
Yeah, the blinds were drawn, the curtains were drawn, you couldn't see through the windows. I mean, you might as well have been shooting at a wall.
Right. And I'm really shocked that he did not get charged with reckless endangerment, because to me, I'm really supportive of police officers, but to me, you don't do that. That's all there is to it.
I mean, he could have hit anything, absolutely anything. They had the one big problem, there's a lot of problems with no-knock raids in my opinion, but is you don't necessarily know what's going on behind that door. So yeah, sure, we would like to be able to catch people. There's a lot of interesting reasons for why they've done them, but what if there were a few kids
with little cameras that look under the door and all is how it goes, but that's not necessarily how they go.
No, and the officers didn't turn on their body cam, so we don't have a lot of evidence as to what really happened. We have some eyewitnesses that were around. And then we have the officers and Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, and that's really all we have to go on to paint this picture. And the warrant, was brought in with false information that they found out that the United States Postal Service had not spotted packages that were suspicious going into Breonna Taylor's home. So they found that out last minute, and yet they still executed the warrant, whether it was a knock or a no knock, depends on who you ask. So they didn't ever end up searching the place either. So they emptied, they dropped rather, 32 rounds and never looked or did anything in regards to that. They exchanged fire.
Yeah. Well, and that, it really surprised me they didn't search the place. But, part of me is like, well, I guess I don't.
Why would they even issue it if they didn't search it?
Sure why they wouldn't. I mean, that just makes no sense to me. I didn't know that information, so that's just insane. Really, I mean, to go to all that trouble and then not bother searching.
It was probably just. I have a feeling. I mean, officers were scared and or somebody was really ill prepared. I don't know if those officers should have been the ones to present that warrant if that's the way that they were going to behave.
Yeah. So I really hope that the folks that falsified the warrant, the folks that did the damage in Breonna Taylor's case, get what is, if they, assuming the evidence there and they go to trial and they are convicted, that they are punished. I mean, innocent until proven guilty is a big thing, but somebody, I don't know who, but somebody is guilty of some pretty nasty things in the Breonna Taylor thing. And, has, still in doing research for this episode, 47 of 50 states still allow no-knock warrants. Oregon is one of the few that does not. And it's actually codified in our law that you can't use a no-knock warrant. Now, the police will still pull you over and do other things, that are, kind of weird and dangerous. But let's take hope that, we continue with the whole no-knock warrant, because
They're dangerous to everybody involved, and
I know
yeah.
police sometimes, I know police logic thinks that it's more dangerous to knock, because at that point you can get shot. And I understand that. But on the other side of the coin, in this case, we appear to have an innocent person who was killed.
Mhm.
And I'm,
It's collateral damage.
well, that's why we give you body armor, is to take a risk.
I mean, yeah, they're the ones who are wearing the body armor, and the people behind the door don't know what's going to happen.
I don't
And
want the police shot. I don't, and
yeah,
all over taking this as, we have to take it as carefully as we can. But
there are better ways to do it. There have to be.
The last 24 hours with Trump and all coming into, into, who would have, if on your bingo card for 2022 you had Trump's, Mar-a-Lago would have a no-knock warrant sent or served on it with 30 FBI agents.
Why did he have a no-knock warrant for a place he wasn't even in?
Well, that's where it was his residence.
And I thought that Florida had a memorandum on no-knock warrants. Oh wait, it's because it's federal.
It's federal.
And we don't have, even though Florida and Oregon, for example, say that they're not allowed, federally they still are.
Right. The federal government theoretically, the federal government can do what they want, but that's going to be an episode for our 9th and 10th Amendments, because I really think states need to take back. That's part of my solution, is the states need to take back their
roles.
They need to come at it where they give the permission of the U.S. government to do things inside their state versus get walked over by them. But that comes to funding and all kinds of other things, which is a whole other subject. But the Secret Service wasn't even notified until the warrant was served.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
And, they had Secret Service on site because it's the residence of a president, and all of a sudden the FBI shows up with 30 guys and a piece of paper, and that's how much notification they had. So that could have been dangerous too.
Yeah, because those are a ton of highly trained professionals.
Thankfully, everybody acted professionally.
That's good.
And that's good, and nobody was hurt. Grateful for that. But it's like, I just don't understand the insanity. And I've heard people say that, well, Trump, he's not even been charged with anything. This is just a warrant. And it's like,
but that's where it starts.
Well, and forgive me if I can't. I mean, we have this whole January 6th fiasco going on now, where people have been charged and held in solitary confinement for 2 years almost, coming up on 2 years for.
It's brutality right there, but
without even having charges, though. I mean, it's this is insane.
It's illegal.
The country does, and I'm a lot of folks talk about what they say national divorce. And it's like, yeah, and that's what they tried before the Civil War. There was a peaceful exodus of several states before the Civil War.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it was not a civil separation
situation anymore. Yeah.
And for me, if I cannot trust the people to obey the laws, can we have a civil divorce?
I mean, I don't. As much as we like to think that divorce of any sort, whether it be on a national level or personal level, can be civil, when we do our best, there's always a chunk of time of hurt. And that chunk of time.
But I'm more concerned about chunk of time of death, because
and that's where that can lead to, is the problem. It depends on how badly things get skewed in views and visions on how everything's being done, how much propaganda gets thrown out there.
Yeah. Well, and I know I have to struggle to find pieces of news that are true and worthy.
Oh yeah.
Because it's so much propaganda is thrown out there. The judge Reinhardt that signed the warrant for Trump, everyone's saying he was appointed by Trump. Well, I can find.
Why does it matter who appointed him?
Evidence that that's true. I found his appointment paper, and Trump's signature is not on it. He was appointed by somebody lower down to fill a vacancy because of a retirement. And
Yeah.
you would think, I thought that all, U.S. I thought all federal judges were appointed by the president, but I'm finding out that that's not the case at all. There's a lot of them that aren't. So, but people are saying, oh, well, Trump appointed him, so he got a fair shake. It's like, well, no, Trump didn't appoint him, and that doesn't mean you get a fair shake.
Right. Just because you appoint somebody doesn't mean that they're always going to be. I mean, Trump's not exactly known for keeping people on his side all the time. So just because he appointed him doesn't mean that they're still, buddies or anything like that. If even even if they did, it's like, do I believe that Trump may have mishandled sensitive information? Possibly. He's not exactly the most dot the I and cross the T type of person. So do I think that this is the way to go about figuring it out? No.
Well, but Hillary Clinton provided evidence that she did mishandle and abused her power as Secretary of State. She had people email her confidential documents, a public server that had the top secret parts cut off of them. They scanned them.
Redacted,
that they were redacted some way. So they didn't say top secret. And since they didn't say top secret, they mailed them. But yet, and this was from what they call a SCIF, which is, a secure conference and information center. It's in that there is no internet connection, right? Computers, but those computers are standalone. And so they had to put it on a USB drive and take it somewhere else to send to her. And, and it was found, quote, that there was no intent to commit a crime, so she wasn't charged. That was by what Comey said about the whole situation back in 2016. Now, forgive me when I say that somebody who bought BleachBit and ran it across her server to make sure the emails that were deleted could not be resurfaced, had a little trouble saying that there was no intent.
Makes you wonder,
And her staff handed in cell phones that had been smashed with hammers.
Somebody knew something was wrong.
Somebody knew something was wrong, but there was no.
Or was paranoid.
Well, but quote, there was no intent. Well, we have evidence of purposely destructing government property, purposely deleting emails, but since she walks free. Now she has a campaign going on that she advertised herself, where you can get your own hat that says "but her emails" on it, where she is selling the hat that says "but her emails." I mean, she has no shame, because it's like, yeah, see, I got away with it, so it's fine. But can you?
It's supposed to be her version of her husband's issue or stuff from the 90s.
Yeah. Oh, the blue dress, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on what your definition of is. I remember that line. I was there.
Yep.
It's like, really? What do you mean by sex?
Yeah.
And old defense, what is mean? I mean, they had, hearings about what is meant.
Yeah, it was a waste of our money.
Well, and what became of it? Nothing.
No.
It's set, and part of me was really frustrated by that. But then, of course, we had to impeach Trump twice, and both times it wasn't upheld by the Senate. So we had a complete waste of not billions, but millions and millions of dollars to drag him through the muck with information we now know someone was actually charged with falsifying information to obtain the FISA warrant that went on to get the quote evidence, which turned out to be a bald-faced lie, because it was paid for by who else? Hillary Clinton. That was all discovered during the whole run-up to the impeachment request. Yet Congress impeached anyway, because, well, that's what we're supposed to do, because that's what they said I was supposed to do. I was supposed to vote yes.
Yeah.
And
because sheeple.
Well, and the Congress people shouldn't be sheeple. I'm sorry.
No.
Part of the problem is that we have Congress people who are, and Oregon is rife with them.
And the others,
exactly by the party line at the national level. All of our people, all of our representatives vote exactly on the party line on the state level. They even vote party line on the city level and county level, which are not supposed to be parties.
and
But
then there's like issues where we send stuff to the courts and such, and they're so long, and it's such a lengthy thing to read. Let's say for them to even assess, even like our committees to assess, that it just people just go okay whatever and they sign it. And meanwhile smaller things like the Breonna Taylor Act are still sitting on a desk, not being pushed forward.
well, and I
When
think it was Ron Paul. Was it Ron Paul that
Rand Rand Paul
oh,
wrote it.
yeah. So I mean, it's like, but we can't have any. Why can't we have a partisan agreement on that? Because that
Right.
passed, and that bill could actually make some changes.
That bill can save lives, not just civilian lives. It can say, I mean, a police officer that was shot, if they're, if it had been any closer, if it had fully severed his femoral artery, he would have bled out and died completely. And having just first aid 101 is pretty much what saved him, because a femoral artery, even a nick, can be deadly because that's one of your main vessels in your leg.
All the blood in the body passes through there every 30 seconds. So
Yeah,
that's like
30 seconds, boom.
a high
So
priority.
I mean,
So
yeah, and a lot of people don't think of their thighs as being that, the life threatening of an area to be damaged, but it really is. But that officer could have lost his life too. And so I mean, ending no knock warrants would save lives. And sure, there might be a lot of instances where lives weren't lost during no knock warrants, but do we really need to keep risking it? Do we really need to keep running that possibility? If the officers and the Secret Service had not decided to be professional at Trump's estate in Florida, that could have been a lot more lives lost too. And luckily, they were professional. But that once again is luck. Who knows, if you had gotten one officer on a day that was just, hell or high water,
yeah.
that could have gone down way differently.
Well, I mean, so what do you is there any solution here that you can think of? I mean, to me, the terrifying thing is how in all three of these cases that we've listed, the Fourth Amendment was trampled upon. Okay.
I think people don't understand the Fourth Amendment clearly, because they're just willing to go against it.
Enforcement doesn't understand,
Yeah.
I just I
A lot of people don't understand what our government is supposed to be, because they're so lost in what it is now, which is just, I mean, it's theatrics and it's lying, and it's a whole Shakespearean theater event practically, without I know it has just as much sex and tragedy. So yeah, it might as well be a theater event. And it sucks that it's gotten to that level. And sure, politics has always been a bit theatrical, even back in the day when this country was formed. But I feel like it's just becoming exponential. And
I wish I'd looked up a quote from Julius Caesar. So there's that.
it makes you wonder. It's like, okay, when are we going to get people in place that are passionate without the absolutely ridiculous theatrics? But we do have some people who are very charismatic and not super like ridiculous, but they don't want to be they don't want to be center stage necessarily.
And as my conversion to a libertarian, which is how I'm registered, that has been part of my challenge in everything that I've looked at, because as noble as the principles of the Libertarian Party are, part of the problem is that everybody wants somebody else to fix it. And
Yes.
nobody wants to be in charge, which it means they should be in charge in my book. We should force them to be, but that's beside the point. the one person you want in charge is the person who doesn't want to be in charge, the person
Yeah.
who doesn't want anything from it. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but
Hmm.
and there's part of the challenge is that, they just want to go about their business and do their thing. Well, you can't do that right now. And so we need to have serious candidates, not ones with boots in their heads. But that's
Right.
changing.
Well, and and how do we tell the difference, like as a citizen who's voting, as a libertarian who's voting, who is the person who doesn't want to be in charge because they would rather just kind of follow the leader or be a sheeple, versus the person who doesn't want to be in charge for whatever other reason, but really they should be in charge because they're the best for the role. How
Well,
do you tell the difference?
for Marco Rubio and Ben Crenshaw, both Republican House of Representatives peoples. Actually, I think Cruz or can't remember
Rubio.
if Rubio is a senator now or not,
Mm-hmm.
but they both fell in line with everything. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Crenshaw is supposed to have been this wonderful out of the box thinker, etc. He's a guy with the eye patch. He's this, that, and the other thing. He's all excited. But yet he falls right into line with everything that the um, big party, the big Republican Party, wants done. Ted Cruz has
Right.
been doing more and more of that recently, which drives me nuts. I used to love Ted
It's like,
Cruz.
why are they doing it? Is because the job's so taxing and demanding that, I
Well,
mean,
they find themselves. I think they find themselves.
complacent.
Well, no, I don't even think it's complacent. I think they think they're doing the right thing. It's just
Mm,
no longer based on the principles they started with. It's based on the results that they want to get.
mm,
And so they start selling out and they start doing things, to make it work.
mm-hmm.
Um, every time somebody, as a Christian, every time somebody tells me that I have to help God do this, I know someone that has an ego and should be watched. Because for starters, God doesn't need my help, all right? God, he doesn't need me to stand up with my firearm and defend Christianity. It's not the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, Romans 13 tells me that I should obey the government. Having said that, is Joe Biden currently my sovereign? Well, not in my reading of the Constitution, because the way I see it is the Constitution is what I authorize to be sovereign.
Mm-hmm.
Biden is just the administrator. So now I have to ask myself whether or not I have to figure out a way to defend the Constitution. I don't mean that in a violent way, but I think I have the authority to not comply with, simply not complying is a good start. And if you get enough people not complying, then things change. I mean, how many companies now have dropped the vaccine mandate because people said, fine, fire me?
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of companies that don't require it anymore. Our military has been decimated, but there's talk again of reinstating many of those people because we just aren't getting the service members to join
Right.
because they don't want to take the jab. And
Yeah.
it's up to you whether you take the jab or not. Personally, for those listening, I'm not saying you shouldn't. My decision is to no more. I took the first two, and my decision is not to do any more. My wife's decision is different than mine, despite what I've told her. But it is your decision. You have to figure that out. But the government does not have the right to tell you that you have to do it.
And not, just a little side note, not making a decision or just deciding to abstain is making a decision.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, and the reason I say that is because it goes back to the how do we know who we're voting for. Choosing to not vote for anybody still is making a choice.
Well, yeah,
And it's choosing to let somebody run your life for you.
yeah, a good friend of mine have had that discussion often because he chose not to vote for Trump, which he has a right to do, and I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, so
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't. And then after that happened, I realized how wrong I was for not voting for one of the valid candidates. As much as I hate saying that as a libertarian, okay, because so often our candidates don't make it to be the valid size.
Yeah. I voted libertarian.
And then in the
Yeah.
national realm.
Mm-hmm.
But if I have a choice between, what is my choices was between, Satan and the devil in most cases, and it just drives me nuts. But
Yeah, I won't pick the lesser of two evils anymore. I'm gonna just keep going with what I think is right and sound and seems best for the country.
well, and
But
therein there's the hard part is the only reason Trump even got my vote in 2020 is because of what he did as president.
which
Um,
was not a whole lot. He was very noisy, but he didn't do a whole lot.
well,
Which is not necessarily a bad thing,
well,
mind
it's
you.
just,
There's
yeah,
a lot
well,
of
I mean,
presidents who do way too much.
Coolidge was one of the most famous quote do nothing presidents, and he was one of the greatest presidents we ever had.
Him and Carter, right? Didn't
Oh,
both of
Carter,
them like not
I
do
lived for
anything?
Carter. No. Carter actively tried to destroy things.
Okay, then maybe it's Coolidge that I'm thinking of too. It's one of the C's.
It's not Carter. Carter is the second worst president in the United States. Or the third.
He only served 4 years, right?
He
Just
only
like
served
Trump.
4 years. He managed to get gas prices through the roof. He managed to destroy an economy. And
So we're repeating Carter's reign right now.
almost everything that Biden is doing is the same things Carter did to the letter.
So when is the last year that Biden actually remembers existing right now? Because I think it was probably when Carter was in office, and therefore he's just repeating the same stuff.
But well, have to understand that Jimmy Carter, I think he was a good man. He's done so much
Oh
after
yeah.
he became president that I'm not going to criticize him for being a good guy. His Habitat with Humanity stuff is incredible.
Yep.
But he was one of the first quote environmental presidents, and he was trying to get us off of gas, and he was trying to, he one of his policies, foreign policies, destroyed our petroleum industry. Now, do I want to get off of petroleum? Absolutely, but you don't get to destroy my economy to do it.
Right, and prohibition doesn't work, and trying to make things so expensive that people can't afford it doesn't work. Look at cigarettes, for example. I mean, just trying to get people to stop using something by force never works.
Right. So, but I mean, but Trump, during Trump's era, the do nothing president that Trump was, he he managed to seal up the borders relatively well. He managed to start his wall, which was, you can decide whether that's a good thing or not. I tend to believe that we should let people in, but we should do that in an orderly fashion. We were for most of his presidency, for the last 2 years of his presidency, we were a gas exporter. We had so much gas and oil in our country that we became a major exporter of gas and oil. And on the first day of office, and the second day of office for Biden, he canceled all the contracts, and the EPA also withdrew a bunch of other contracts that were, a bunch of areas for drilling. So between those two things, he essentially stopped all oil production in this country. Plus, nobody is building, because of that, nobody is building refineries. And even if we were to suddenly get our oil back up in line, we'd have trouble refining it because we have refineries starting to grow old and fail. Nobody wants to build new ones because they think they're going to get legislated out of existence. And, so here we are. Instead of letting the market take care of it, regulate it within reason to try to protect the air and water and everything, sure, but let business be business. And we could do that.
Give it to the free market up to a certain point, and we'll fix it.
Gas prices could get cheaper. They're here in Oregon or near Oregon and Idaho. They're taking down 5 dams to make the fishies happy. Some of those 5 dams have power that are going to put 50,000 people out of power, and they plan to build kind of power plant to fix that.
Well, and I understand the need to help the fish and the environment, but at the same time, I'm like, Washington's done a really good job at maintaining a balance between the hydro electricity and keeping the salmon happy. So
except for
there are ways.
They're the ones that are helping us get rid of the dams.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not too surprised.
I happen to love salmon, and I will only eat wild caught salmon. I hate that farm raised stuff. But I happen to love salmon, and I'm all over. But the Lake Mead down near Las Vegas, almost completely dry.
That
because
lake is horrible. Sorry, I've been there.
well, I've been there too, and the lake was never my favorite. But the reason it's completely dry is because they had to keep draining it, even though they didn't need to for power, but they had to
Hmm.
keep draining it to keep the fish alive downstream.
Yeah.
And that's part. And now you have a lake that's dried up where all the fish are dying. So tell me which one's better, And well, of course, now they'll say, well, that wasn't a natural lake, and so those fish don't
Well,
live.
I mean, are
So
we going to switch out this hydropower to a different type of like a geothermal power? Are we going to switch it out for solar or wind instead? Because if we're switching it out for coal, then we're going backwards.
and that's what everybody,
Oh,
and that's what Germany has been doing. They've been switching out they've been rebuilding their coal plants and their gas plants because they don't have power. And now they don't have gas because the pipeline across the Black Sea is closed because of the Ukraine war.
right. I
But
mean, then we have to find another less invasive form of collecting power that's also not damaging in yet another way, because coal is damaging in a lot of its own ways too. So,
the safest and least damaging form of power that we know of is nuclear, and nobody in this country wants it. Or I shouldn't say nobody, but the
uh,
environmentalists are dead set against it.
yeah, it's. I mean, the A bomb is probably the reason for that
Well,
paranoia. Yeah, in
yeah, but
Chernobyl.
I'll disagree at this point. I really think it's people just making sure that we're economically strapped. Because if energy is expensive, then you can't do a lot of things. And when energy was cheap, this country grew, and we became the international power that we were. Take that away
Right.
from us, and all of a sudden, we're not. I don't want to be the police of the world. Okay,
Yeah.
I do want to be a vibrant economy that helps the rest of the world come. In the
Yeah.
1800s, in the 1850s, 1860s, the international average income was still around $2 a day.
Hmm.
After the American Industrial Revolution, that went up to over $500 a year,
Wow.
and higher than that. And it became, and it went. I mean, and that was internationally. Everybody got better because the United States economy grew, and that's the way good economies work.
Right.
Bad economies work by turning slave labor and turning that into a profit, and we won't talk about specifically who does that, but most people can imagine. And I'm not a I don't want a slave economy, because though it's been around for thousands of years, in the end it never works for long. It never works well.
No. And it's another one of those forcing people to do things never works situation. It's not a long term plan.
Nope.
Um, and
Well, that got
and
deep.
yeah.
Let's go back to the Fourth Amendment. Wow.
We digress very easily.
We got nuclear energy, and we're going to we're gonna and I'm all over solar where it works, and I'm all over geothermal where
Yeah.
it works. It's
Yeah, where
just
it works.
there's
But
Oregon should be a bastion for geothermal because we have so many volcanoes around here that are still considered.
right.
Why couldn't we use geothermal? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I have no problems with it.
There's going back to what you were talking about. So, could you elaborate more on what you were talking in regards to the ATF and the photocopying that Miss Scott was doing?
Sure. And I'll talk a little bit about experience. Some 35 years ago, I actually was a gun dealer. I worked for a gun shop in California, and so I'm familiar with this paperwork and everything that they
That's
do.
gotta be interesting, considering I've always been told California is very anti-gun.
Well, most of our sales are to peace officers. That's
Okay.
but no, they're not. I mean, San Diego, especially that time, San Diego was very red.
Hmm,
Um, you know,
interesting.
in San Diego and Imperial counties, generally Orange County, Riverside County, they're all actually quite conservative, if
Hmm,
not red. They're even the Democrats there are quite conservative.
interesting.
Um,
Huh. Okay.
yeah, it's you. All you hear about is Newsom, who tries to tell you that we're anti.
Well,
Really not the
and I
case.
grew up in Washington, so the people who were Californians that ended up in Washington were often very blue. So
Yeah,
you get a view that okay, well, people
I'm an
from
odd
there must
Californian
be.
in that I came to Oregon and I'm red, but I'm conservative. I wouldn't call myself a Republican anymore. I'm a conservative, and I'm proud to hail that. But I'll play libertarian. So, what she was doing, it is not unusual for the ATF to show up at a gun store and say, "I need to look at your books." Okay, this is normal. Now, according to federal law, as I understand it, there can be no database of gun ownership. The instant check system, as it currently exists for most of the country, has to be deleted after 72 hours. If you run a gun check, that data is not kept. It has to be deleted. Now, what she was doing was with her private phone, Miss Scott was with her private phone copying. There's a logbook that every time you get a stock of guns, you log each of the guns in and say where it came from by serial number. Okay. And then when you sell it, they fill out their paperwork, their 4470s. They fill those out. You do the whatever background check happens to be legal for your state, and every state has a background check. The whole thing that we have to fix the background check system. No, we don't. We need to make it more
No,
efficient.
it's there.
Yeah, we don't make it more efficient, but you can't buy a gun from a dealer
without a background check.
without a background check. And getting a gun from a private citizen, the legal ways are very limited without a background check. And it usually has to do with inheritance. If I inherit firearms from somebody, I do not have to get a background check to own those guns, as long as I'm legally capable. Now, I am responsible for turning those guns in if I'm not legally capable of owning a gun. Now, back to Miss Scott and her.
Yes.
So usually they come in, they look through your records, say it's fine, or listen, these things are wrong. We have to fix these. Information's missing, it's smudged, it can't be read. We'll give you this much time, usually 30 days, to fix it.
Okay.
Which means we contact the buyer and get the information, or we go through our records and find the original invoice and get the information. Somehow you fix it. All right.
Yeah.
Now, the ATF will occasionally say that you have to have the office of the ATF locally will say that we want your phone number of the person on the top of the 4470. We want their phone number on the top. Some of the offices will say, I want the phone number on the bottom. There's no space for the 4470, at least there didn't used to be for the 4470 for having a phone number, because it was not required by law.
Right.
The ATF wants one, so they tell you they want one, and if you don't put it on there, doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means it's considered an administrative error.
Okay. Administrative error seems so vague.
Yes, well, it's the government. What do you want?
Well, yeah, it's just, that could be, like you said in the intro, that could be anything.
Yeah, that could be anything. And 99.99 times out of 100, or out of 1,000, I guess, it's not going to affect the FFL owner, the owner of the license, the federal firearm.
They'll never know that it happened, right?
Well, it's not. They'll know it happened because they had to fix it, but it's like no big deal.
Okay.
Right. Now, Miss Scott looked through the books, and there was over 4,000 lines of entries in this A&D, right? This acquisition in the A&D book. She took pictures of all of them. It took her 3 months. Usually they come in for a day or two, look through your records, say, fix this, we'll be back. And when they come back, you open up your books, you show you fix it, you're done. All right, it's that easy. It's nothing to be freaked out about. She spent 3 months photographing this information, her and an assistant, on her cell phone, not photocopying it, not putting it in any kind of information except for on her cell phone. And when asked, well, what are you worried about? Well, you're not supposed to have a database. Well, apparently she wasn't just taking pictures. She was actually scanning it with her phone using optical character recognition. So now the ATF office in Arizona has a record of all those guns. They have the opticals, and they can search the database and see who owns which guns, which is technically illegal. And according to our ATF, she broke the rules. The question is why she did it. There has been no answer why she did it. She said, because that's what I think I needed to do.
The gun shop owner, did he not find it suspicious that she kept coming back and going through this?
Yeah, except for he was a nice guy and just called the ATF and said, what's going on? She's doing an audit. It's fine. There's no problem. Now, here's where I think our society as a general rule has to get a clue. If it was my gun shop and I had her filmed doing that, my next call would have been to my lawyer. Say, she's doing this and we need to get a judge to stop it. And I wouldn't have interfered with an IOI. I wouldn't have interfered with them because that's bad news. That's but I would have looked to a federal judge to stop the audit.
Yeah, if an audit is supposed to be something relatively quick and simple, you would think that, was he a new shop owner? Was he just being passive?
He was just trying to be cooperative.
So he's been through these before and probably had quite a few that probably didn't last very long. So you would think after a while that you would scratch your head and go, huh, why is she still here?
I do blame Mr. Nagel, Nagel. I think that's how you pronounce the name. I do blame Mr. Nagel
Nagel, yeah.
because I would have, if it was
Critical
my,
thinking skills are gone.
yeah, well, my gun shop, it would have been, okay, the second day, as soon as I saw her taking pictures, I would on the
Mm.
lawyer,
How
right?
soon did he know she was taking photos?
Same day.
Oh, for
He has video
fuck's sake.
because
He's just,
he had a video of his office where she was working and she's sitting there taking video, taking
it's, he, I mean, he's just, at that point in time, negligence is just as bad as guilt
Mhm.
because he is the reason that, I mean, this database now exists in Arizona because he sat back and let it happen. He just sat back and complied.
Right.
And that
And
is
our cell
dangerous.
phone, the ATF says, oh, we don't have a
Oh, Arizona does now.
well, no. The ATF is the federal, and she can either send it to them or not. But they'll say, "Oh, we don't have a database because she didn't have any record. There's no record of her doing this, except for the
Mm-hmm.
fact that there's videotape of her doing it."
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's just this typical government overstep. Now, when we worked with the ATF back in the this is back in the 1980s. This was a little while ago. um the first time they came in, I was new to the gun shop. I didn't know anything, and they came in and said, we need to see this. And I said, okay, let me call my boss. And I called my boss and he said, oh yeah, just show him the books. And he said, okay. So I said, one moment, went and got the books, and I laid them on the counter. They thumbed through them and say, this one doesn't have this information, can you get it for me? So I looked at it, I said, I'm sure we can. Most of our customers were repeat
Mm-hmm.
customers.
Right.
So I said, I'm sure we can. He said, okay, you fix that and we're good. And he walked away. And that was a big deal. That was all it was. So the next time he came in, it's like, oh, I see him coming in the door, because you get to know them, you get the books and
Yeah.
let them look. And it's just the way, I mean, because you have to let them look, it's part of your FFL.
Right.
But they're very professional. Most of them are very professional, and there's no problem. The ones that I dealt with. Now,
Yeah.
I really think that there's a culture in our government of literally a culture of corruption, and where they're trying to go far beyond their you know ask me, the ATF, the FBI, I don't see a real strong
What was it?
constitutional constitutional clause to have them, period.
What was it that Trump said about or overreach or overstep in regards to the recent raid? I thought there was an interesting use of verbiage that he had used, and I'm trying to remember what it was.
Well, I think it's hilarious that everyone accused him of being a Nazi, yet the current administration is doing so much far more that is in a Nazi-like fashion.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it really scares me, because November is coming, and
Mm-hmm.
if people talk about a red wave, of conservatives getting thrown into the House and the Senate, and if that really starts happening, will we suddenly not have an election? Will we, they're already trying to prosecute um, uh, representatives
Yeah.
currently in office, to get so they can't run again. I mean, that's part of the
Yeah.
deal. I forgot her name, from Colorado. Um,
I feel like there's always been pressure in games like this going on. It's just for some reason now people aren't being quiet about it anymore. They're not just letting it slide. So maybe we're seeing it more.
news, maybe it's just because I'm noticing now, but some of this is really new to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the the first president I voted for was to re-elect um, Reagan. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he got into office when I was 17, 16, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So my first election was his re-election. And one of the I at 18, I went overseas and lived in Lesotho, Africa, for a couple of years, and I saw how much a president changes how the U.S. government is viewed. I
Yeah.
got raises, functional raises, because the dollar did better against the South African rand.
Mm.
And because it went from, like 50 cents or 75 cents South African to almost $2, 2 rands per dollar, it had
Mm.
change. It was like doubling my money.
Right.
And I saw how the world changed when you had a president who was, Trump had a twitchy eye, and internationally he did some amazing things. People didn't know what he was going to do, so they were afraid of him. And Reagan, people were terrified of him. They thought
Mm-hmm.
this. They saw his movies and saw the actor, the
Mm-hmm.
tough guy, and they thought that was him. And he
Right.
played. He played the. I never feared that we were going to get into any kind of terrible conflict,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody else didn't know that.
Right.
And, as a president, you sort of have to keep people guessing, because if you don't, if they think you're a doormat, well, guess what?
Mm-hmm.
At Ukraine, look at what happened in Afghanistan. Look what had happened with China over the Nancy Pelosi thing. Look what's going to happen with Taiwan probably before the end of next year. All of these are because we have a weak president who is not going to do anything. Should we do all
Yeah.
things? Should we be out of Afghanistan? Absolutely. We shouldn't have gotten out the way we did.
Right.
Should we have stood up a little more to Russia and kept them from going into Ukraine with the UN's help? Absolutely. I think we should have. But instead, Russia knew that they had no consequences to follow, except for the fact that they've lost 15,000 or 20,000 of their own soldiers.
And then their soldiers don't want to follow them.
Yeah, well, I'm still not sure what they hope to gain out of this, except for the fact that because of what Biden has done, the ruble is doing
It's peacocking. It's all peacocking. And it sucks. It's taking people's lives in the process.
I think, and that's really frightening, But as a president, I think you have to play a certain amount of poker. But the problem with playing poker is that once in a while you do have to go all in, whether you have the cards or not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the game's played. And I don't want, if I was king of the United States, I would do everything in my power to get us out of everywhere we currently are. On the other side of the coin, I would want my enemies to, or at least my possible enemies, to think, if we do something, he's got a twitchy eye and he may overwhelm.
You need to, in some ways, have a fine balance between being a loud and angry person and a firm person, but still having control of all the pieces on the board, right? Well, and for so long we have not had control over all the pieces on the board. We just have volley between having somebody with a twitchy eye that you're not quite sure what's going to happen to somebody who's complacent.
We also have found out that the military under Trump actually lied to him and told him that we were out of places where they weren't out of. I mean,
right.
Those people gone to jail. I'm sorry, if you're going to lie to the president, his position of forces, that's got to be something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that has to be, and that's appalling.
Yeah, and Trump again is not my favorite, and he was loud and obnoxious.
Oh.
I voted for him in 2016 because I knew he was going to be loud and obnoxious.
I didn't vote for him because I didn't think putting a celebrity in office was going to be that great of an idea. At the time, I did not realize how many presidents we have had that were celebrities prior to this. I just knew he was a loud, obnoxious celebrity. Yeah.
Reagan was pretty much the first, and he did a good job. He was a good governor of California.
Yeah.
The state did well under him. He was a good president.
And he did some great stuff. And Trump had his strong points too.
Had George Sr. not raised taxes, I think we probably would have been in a completely different place. But he raised taxes to get rid of the deficit. His goal was to get rid of the deficit. Call it noble if you want. But on the other side of the coin, it's what lost and then gave us the Clintons.
Mm-hmm.
And and Ross Perot, who sucked a bunch of votes from George W. Bush. Well, I voted for him.
I don't know, Ross Perot, he makes me laugh.
I can't complain too much because I'm one of the idiots that voted for him. Because I wanted somebody who had a plan, and he was the only one that was proposing a plan. Everybody else had, you vote for me because why? You didn't give me a reason.
I mean, have you seen, there's a clip in one of the Futurama episodes where There are basically clones, and they are going up against each other for president, and they're basically saying, "I oppose everything that he's for, and I'm for everything he opposes," and that's just what they're doing back and forth. As I get older, I feel like we are moving closer and closer to that, and that's kind of scary to me. I'm like, we're not, the critical thinking isn't there as much anymore. The knowledge and the history and the understanding of our economy and of the way our country was formed and how it works and why it was. The why.
Well,
That's the part that wasn't taught enough in school, in my opinion.
that is a root of many of our problems, because everyone thinks that the federal government should be doing all this stuff, and it's
But
not.
that's not their job.
When it's not capable of it, you can't.
No.
I mean, they don't know what we need in Hillsborough. And they can't give us what we
Our
need.
country is too big. There's too many people. It's too big land wise. There's too much variation. There's too much difference for us to do that. We should be more like Europe and a bunch of little states that are kind of like countries that were that we can pass between and interact with and trade with and have a common like monetary system.
That was our
But
plan, except
yeah, and that would have been great.
thanks to people like Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Delano Roosevelt and some others. We turned our back on that and walked. Thanks to the 15th Amendment, thanks to the 16th Amendment, we turned
Mhm.
away and walked away from all of that. We put the large government in charge when we voted for taxes, when we took away the states' rights to select senators. All of these things that happened all at the turn of the century, all at the same time,
Yeah.
have all that, and the education system being taken over by a bunch of literally socialists who are
We
teaching you that your history is evil, even though if you look at it, you know,
no, our history that we're learning is wrong.
well, the history we're learning is wrong, and our history in this country, was this country perfect? By no means.
Oh
But
no, never. No country's perfect by any means.
our founding principles, which is where we're supposed to start, not where we're supposed to end, we're good.
Well,
And
and that was after so much trials and tribulations of the people of the founding fathers and the framers. They went through a lot to learn to get to that point. It's not like they just were birthed out and had this novel idea.
they did. I mean, people don't realize some of our founding fathers were trying to make a king. They wanted the president to be
Right.
president for life. I mean, it was something some of them wanted. Now,
Yeah.
luckily, they didn't win, but there was there was all kinds of people involved in that discussion, and I'm sure there was a lot of heated debates, about how things should go. But I think,
Mm.
and our system came out of it, and our system is adversarial on purpose. That's
Yes.
why we have a House. So why we have a
Hmm.
Senate. That's why
Checks and
we
balances.
have three different. Yeah, that's why we have three different parts of the government that are separate,
Hmm.
but equal. And because we knew that contention is how you make the best possible solution. If you have autocracy, it's
You need to have every perspective that you can. You need to be willing to look at things from places that are uncomfortable. And sometimes that means you need somebody who looks at things completely differently, even if you don't agree with it, because that's how you learn and that's how you grow. But we've spent so much time in this country deciding to just go with whatever the party says, whatever the federal government says, whatever they have to have. What's There's this like strange notion that they think that their investments or that what they want is what's best for us.
yeah.
And some of them, yes, don't get me wrong, but we can't guarantee that that's why they all are doing what they're doing. It's not always because they think it's what's best for everybody in America. There are other reasons people do things.
No. And that brings us to Joe Biden's son, but I think we should leave off.
Sorry.
That's okay. Today we talked a lot about the Fourth Amendment. We saw at least three solid examples of where the U.S. government has
Not an abuse.
the FBI and other parts of the government into a political wing. And
Mm-hmm.
if Trump broke the law, I'm all over convicting him. Don't get me wrong. It's just that this has never been done before.
Hmm.
And we have seen in the past, we have seen Hillary Clinton um, and Bill Clinton and other people do illegal things and get away with them because, well, I thought I was doing everything all right. You know, they,
Right.
as James Comey put it, Clinton had no intention, which I completely disagree with on prima facie. But uh,
I don't think he knows what that word means.
pardon?
Oh, it's like I don't think he knows what that word actually means. Intention, but
Oh, intention? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No, I
that's
don't think
yeah.
so either. But everybody in the audience, I'd like to thank you for joining us. This conversation on the Fourth Amendment has been really enticing, and
Hmm.
this is a bonus episode. We'll have another episode next week where we're going to have Leon Noble again, and we're going to be talking about the Fifth Amendment and maybe the Sixth Amendment, though I wouldn't pretend that we're going to get through that many. Um,
Yes, and it's
but
more than just saying I plead the fifth.
yeah, it's more than I saying I plead the Fifth. That's right. And I would like to encourage everybody to seek truth and stay curious. History is so important if you get accurate history, and
Hmm.
most of us in the United States no longer have accurate history. And I will have to say, even though I grew up several years after Jimmy did, my history lessons, the ones I learned the most, are the ones that I studied on my own.
Yes.
There's resources out there. Don't believe what everybody says. You know, Reagan did have one thing he used to say: trust but verify. And if somebody tells you a historical fact, say, okay, I'll accept that, but then go and verify it anyway, because most of the time you're going to find out that they're probably not telling the right information. Thank you for coming to the Liberty Mindset.
Thank you, everyone.